Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So that's to help me keep the Dhamma in it, keep my perspective, and to ask the devas, whatever the forces, to help bring the Dhamma to light too. So I thought what I would talk about today is some of what felt like the positives and some of the challenges of our week of evacuation, some of the things that we were witness to, and some of them were quite incredible and some were challenging. And there's really Dhamma in it all. And part of the challenging things was when we were in Willits, where we evacuated, and I think some of the antennas had been affected by the fire, which it literally began as a firestorm. It was for people, our friends that were actually further down Tomkai and down in the flats of Redwood Valley. They had very little notice. It was coming fast. The winds had built up from the fire and probably before the fire, and then the fire creates its own. And there were embers flying, and from what people said, it was extremely chaotic, and it was really about getting out with your life. And we have two really close supporters, Sandra and Dee, and I think you've all heard about them. And Sandra happened to be she's the second person who called me on the phone. So she got herself out, got into Ukiah, got a hotel, and then started thinking about who she needed to call further up the road. So she started making phone calls. And she didn't have much time. She left in her pajamas and her robe and with her slippers. And she probably grabbed her purse and her phone. Dee, who was not that far away, maybe 100 yards, but in a different direction, was awakened by neighbors. Sandra woke up to horns and saw the lights and thought the sky was interesting, and then she went to the other side, looked out her back door, and across the creek and up the hill she could see the flames. They were very large, so she knew she had to get out of there. But she had the presence, and she can, we all can feel stress in a situation like that, but she had the presence. There was no power, and she knew how to get her garage door opened. She didn't panic because the button wasn't working. And then when she was in Ukiah, she called one of our friends, Kristen, the one we went. I mentioned that we had gone up to see if she'd gotten out. And Kristen, who's usually the calming force for Sandra under pressure, was panicky. And she said, there's no power, I can't get the garage door open. And Kristen laughingly tells it. She says, Sandra was like, now just stay calm. You just have to pull this cord or whatever, and so we really can call on what we have within us when we need to, if we remember. And Dee, her neighbor, knocked on her window and woke her up and said, "You have to get out. You have to get out." And Dee didn't bother getting dressed yet. She started thinking, what do I need to take? And she was grabbing her little Buddhas, and she actually got out of there with a suitcase, and she managed to grab some of her important papers, and she was still kind of deciding what to grab. And there was another knock on the door, and another neighbor said, "You have to go now." And so she didn't even get dressed. She threw her clothes in the car. There were flames in the backyard, flames in the front yard. And she got out, and both of them described very harrowing drives out with flames and smoke and flames on both sides and wires down, telephone poles falling over. But they both did it, and they thought about each other. So when Dee made it to the local market and saw Sandra's next door neighbor, and he called Sandra, and she was already in Ukiah, and so he said, your friend Dee is here, and she said, send her over to the Hanford Inn, that's where I am, and she can share my room. So, and these are two very different beings, very different characters, and they've really been a support to each other because of that commonality. So that reference to commonality of experience is a really good one when we have difficult challenges with people that we find abrasive or just do things differently than we would do when we find aversion coming up. A really good thing to recall is just that commonality that we share in our lives and our challenges. They may not look the same, but a challenge is a challenge. So it's just good to remember that. And we got out, and we were in Willits, and we very quickly had no internet, no phone, no way of contacting, no way of knowing what was happening. We didn't get any information for a long time. And you realize how tapped in you are to, even at the monastery, to access to the internet and to a telephone. And that was all gone. Even the workers, the Red Cross workers, they didn't really have information for us. But people just got on with what needed to happen in the moment, and it was astounding, the response and how quickly people pulled it together to help out. Some woman, I think she was on the council, for the city council for Willits, came up to us and offered her home for us to take showers, and if we needed to crash on the couch. And, just supporters that live in Willits came searching for the monastic community and found us at the second shelter. They moved us from the first place at breakfast time, offered breakfast at the high school, and they set up cots, and people found us there. And I told them, I said, well, the monks can't sleep in a room. It's part of their rule. They can't sleep in a room with women. Oh, well, no problem. We're just going to open that room over there. They had them make a sign that said monastery. They put it on the wall, and that was for the men in our community, the monks and the laymen. It was very touching. Without a second, not a bat of the eyelid. It was really incredible. And they fed us. There was food. We were well taken care of. But it was a community of 26 of us. And with 26 people, you're bound to get different kinds of energy and different ideas about what might be the best way to proceed or not. So we had, this one pull to go out to the Highway 1 was closed. A fire had crossed over Highway 101 between Willits and Redwood Valley. And so we, most of us, I think, were pretty much on the same page that we were just going to have to just settle and just wait until we got information. But some were more restless and more wanting to find out and feeling like it was urgent to get in touch with Lumpur. And so a layman from Australia who had just arrived Sunday night, who'd never been there before. It was a very powerful experience for him. He sent an email and said he was very touched and very moved seeing the practice in that capacity and that people practicing in that under those circumstances, and very inspiring for him. He was we had just such a delightful group of people, really. And so this one person went north with this Australian and got a phone signal and came back and was ready to drive out to the coast and then come back and go to City of 10,000 Buddhas in Ukiah. We had to go out to the coast, go south on one, come back through Anderson Valley, which is further south, and then come back north to get to City of 10,000 Buddhas. And some of us were very concerned about tying up the roads, getting on the roads, because with 101 closed, that could have been a main way for people to get fire assistance to get in, was by coming from the coast. And we knew Santa Rosa had a very bad fire. We heard something that there was 6 or 7 independent firestorms going because of the winds, and the humidity was so low. So we didn't really know. It felt like Armageddon. We didn't really know what. So we were having a group discussion and kind of deciding what to do. And a lot of members of the community were being quiet because they still are, it's a monastic community, so they defer to the seniors. And so, but Beth and I were able to be vocal because we're lay people. So we're not held by quite, there can be the respect, but we're not held by that same. So, and I've been there a long time. I feel a great responsibility for taking care of the community. And so we were very adamant that we needed to just wait till we had more information. And then they came and they gave us a report, and we gathered around the map, and they showed us on the map what was going on. And somebody said, we're telling everybody in Willits that they need to be ready to evacuate, because if the wind shifts, it's close to Willits. It could come into Willits. And then everybody looked at each other again, and we decided, okay, let's go to the coast. We don't want to keep running from fires. So we called our friend Metika, who's a member of the CALM group with Sakula and I. And she has a sitting group in Fort Bragg. And she has a straw bale meditation hall. And so the 26 of us went over to her house. And, it just, one person wanted to continue to city at 10,000 Buddhas. And then they had already been in contact with them. And Ajahn Pasana was in New Hampshire. Ajahn Siddhanta was on the satellite maps. He was in New Hampshire. And they were telling us what we should do. And I was saying, Lumpur, you're not here. You're not on the ground. And they're warning us to not go by the maps necessarily. So he said, yeah, that makes sense. And then we found out that the city of 10,000 Buddhas had started to come to help collect the group. And they got turned away. They got told to stay off the road. So we did get to settle in Fort Bragg that night. And that was actually good. It's just kind of like we just needed to breathe. So we had a wonderful impromptu. It was her Monday night as her group night, and so 3 people showed up. One took a monk and 2 lay people over to his house to try to kind of ease the numbers a little bit, but the rest of us stayed for the meditation. And then we got this lovely Dhamma talk from Ajahn Siripanyo. So, it could have been any other Monday night. And then had a good night's rest, and she just took us to Denny's. She called Denny's and told us she was coming with 26 people, and they kind of reserved a wing for us. And she just ordered 3 things: a big plate of this, a big plate of this, and a big plate of that. And just everybody got their own coffee or tea from ordered that. And it just was, the waitresses were lovely. People were just very, very beautiful. And already at the shelter, there was already clothes being put out for people, because, that's the one thing none of us had was change of clothes. And so just recognizing the goodness in people, seeing the goodness in people that you might not normally interact with, or interact with on a very kind of surface layer level, and that was quite lovely. And then we did, the next day we went out, and one of the Thai women who'd come Sunday night to stay with us, and she'd had to abandon her car with everything in it, so she didn't have much, but she had her wallet, and she wanted to treat everybody to Subway. So we got sandwiches, and then we just had a picnic on the way over to Ukiah. That was very lovely. And City of 10,000 Buddhas, we were well taken care of. They just treated us like family and gave us our own space and supplied breakfast for us. And somebody on their own offered paninis every morning. They just couldn't do enough for us. It was incredibly generous. I don't know where the men stayed. I don't know what that was like, but for the women, we were way back in one corner. And it's funny enough, back when Sangapala first came into being, we sponsored a retreat, and City of 10,000 Buddhas let us use their facilities. And we used a building that hadn't been used since the hospital had closed down in the 70s. And so this was like 91. And we got to stay on a wing of that building, so it was quite interesting. But we each had our own space, which was kind of sweet. And then we got a schedule going because in that case the routine is really supportive. So having a routine of practice. So we decided, some of us went to the 4 o'clock puja that they were doing down in the main hall for the city of 10,000 Buddhas. And then otherwise people could show up at 5 o'clock if they so chose, and we'd have the meditation, chanting and a meditation before breakfast. And the monks got very keen to help clean, so that's not high on the list of things that the community there does. They have to manage this incredibly vast space. So there were cobwebs in some of the places, and so the monks got really gung-ho about cleaning, and that's how they directed that energy of, how to do something useful, how to kind of sharpen the mind and direct it in a useful way, and in a way that expresses gratitude and being a part of. And then Beth and I, we had to go. We went to briefings in town, and we'd go and had to go figure out what was happening to mail, because it also was around Katina time, so a lot of packages come in for us, and what's happening to all that. So we had to sort a lot of things out. And it's funny how much time that can take. And really, we all were really tired. It's just something in the emotion of that experience. Even though there wasn't the fire at our feet, you have to recognize that it does have an impact. And being gentle with oneself. And in that, kind of recovering from just that, just adjusting to this shift. Just adjusting to the shift and supporting each other. And we had, when we got to City of 10,000 Buddhas, that's where we caught up with Dee and Sandra, and that felt really good to be able to have community around them, because they hadn't been told specifically, but they were both pretty sure their houses were gone. So just being able to support those two dear people in that. And going to these meetings and being really touched by the professionalism that was expressed by our sheriff, who I'd never had met him before. I'd heard really good things about him, but I'd never met him. He was incredible. Very centered, very clear, no nonsense, but a lot of heart. And same with the crews they had together with CAL FIRE. They had meteorologists. I mean, they just brought in a lot of people, and people were really respectful of each other, and you could just feel the heart in it. People were very caring and wanting to, give the information to these people who didn't know if they'd lost their homes, if there were 8 people that were unaccounted for, and Sandra didn't know what happened to her next door neighbor. She had a gate, and she suspected very strongly she didn't get out. She'd had cancer, and she wasn't in good shape. She was 86 or 87, and Sandra, by the time she got out, she had to move. She really had to move because she couldn't see the road. Cars were running. One car ran into a tree. We could see afterwards there was a truck that had smashed into a tree, and I just can't imagine the chaos. We were so much more fortunate. But just the heart that people express, the caring. That was a really profound part of the whole experience in this time of our country where there's so much divisiveness. And here we were in this crazy situation, and people were there for each other, and nobody cared who you voted for, how you felt about guns, how you felt about, it was kind of like, this is about human life, and we have compassion. And compassion came up a lot, empathy, support, care. There was a coffee shop in town that was offering free coffee to evacuees, and so Beth and I were really tired at one point, and I said, let's go get some free coffee. And so we went in, and there were the CDF people were sitting in a ring, but they were pretty preoccupied with whatever they were talking about. but there were two young men in camouflage. And so I went up and I said, I want to thank you for being here. And this young man says, I can say that now because I'm 62. They're probably in their 20s. And he said, well, we just got here. And I said, I don't care. I'm thanking you for coming because we're really grateful. And he said, well, it's my job, and I love my job, and I get paid really well. And I said, I don't care. We're still very grateful. You're here, and we're very grateful that you're here. And then we were in line to get our coffee, and he and his friend were in front of us, and he was looking at well, what do people recommend here? And I said, well, there's that brown sugar latte. People seem to like that. What are you getting? And I said, well, I'm an evacuee. I'm getting the free coffee. And he said, no, you're not. You're getting a brown sugar latte, and I'm buying it for you. And then he said, in fact, I'm going to buy one for everybody in the line. And there were 3 of us, but it was very sweet. And then it was kind of like, well, what did you end up getting? Oh, I got the lavender latte. Okay, you have to give me a taste of your brown sugar latte. So it's kind of like just bringing people together, just that sense of, and being able to laugh and joke and make a little bit of light around the circumstances. That was a really important part that stood out, is people just kind of normalizing it as much as possible and not drawing on the fact that this is not where I thought I'd be and what I normally am doing. Mostly just trying to be with it moment to moment. And that's we speak about it all the time, but the value of that is, and when you see it in moments like that, how important that really is. Keep coming back and centering ourselves and getting that perspective from that place of being more grounded rather than off in this fretting or worrying, which will come into it for sure, the fretting. But then kind of coming back. And that's what we're learning on the cushion, to keep coming back, and eventually we settle. And so this is what we do in any circumstance. We just keep coming back, and that becomes the normal. And that's where it's very powerful, very powerful. That's what keeps us conscious of our actions, our intentions, and it allows us to really be with others as well as ourselves. And it's not always pleasant. Sometimes being with what's going on is really annoying, but we can be with annoying. So, and just the perspective of that we're all in this together, that's very powerful. We also were wondering, because of the fires in Santa Rosa, we were trying to gather information about, like, the Angelus Center where we hold our Thanksgiving retreat, and it was very difficult to find any kind of information. And then this letter started circulating from Sister Christine, who's the nun who was the administrator for the Angelus Center, and I'm sure she was in her mid-70s. She was a delightful being. We saw a letter from her, and we couldn't tell exactly what happened. We knew that one of the smaller buildings had burned, one of the houses that one of the nuns had lived in, and that one of the hall that we've been using in Ursuline Hall at the end, opposite the kitchen, was like an apartment that the cook would use, and that was gone. That had burned down. But we couldn't really tell what else, and so we were trying to figure out, is there still a Thanksgiving retreat? Is there not? And then we saw this letter, and she had a very beautiful perspective in the letter. She didn't say what had really happened, but it was clear there was a lot of damage. And she just said, when one door closes, another opens. And I thought, this is a woman who's given her life to this center, and this is where she's directing her mind. As Sakula was saying, how do we direct our mind? So when one door closes, another opens. Gives a lot of potential to anything, any experience. And then we had people contacting us a lot and trying to figure out, were we okay? What could people so wanted to do something? When people are in, you don't really know what the situation is fully. There's just this energy that comes out to want to help. So we put on the notice board we put on our website, we started telling people. I was getting text after text after text. And I wanted to throw my phone away, but I didn't. I was just with that feeling, and I understood also the concern, but it was like, wow, it just keep coming. So I just kept telling people, go to the website, go to the website, and pretty soon those started slowing down, and people started just automatically going to the website, where they were keeping up a post of what was going on, and I think some photos were going onto the website, and we put up that we could use food cards, so we gave a couple of places. It was just incredible how quickly and how fast they came in from all over the world. People were getting these food cards to us. So, it's just people really wanted to do something. And then our Katina, which is our biggest celebration of the year, where we celebrate the end of the Rains Retreat, the official Rains Retreat, that was supposed to be Sunday the 15th. And we were at City of 10,000 Buddhas that day. We didn't know where we'd be for sure that day, but Ajahn Mahaprasad is the abbot of a temple in Fremont, California, in the Bay Area. And he had an ordination that afternoon, but he offered the use of their temple. And it felt very important to do it, more so that people could see the monks and just get that physicalness, get it a visual and a tangible, that everybody was really okay. A lot of people were fretting and worried, and what do you need? And we were asking people to not come up to Ukiah because we wanted to keep the roads open for whatever emergency first responders needed. So we put a last-minute announcement that the Katina would be at Fremont, and I didn't go because I wanted to, number one, attend the briefing. And also it was getting close to when they were starting to let people back into certain parts of Redwood Valley. They weren't letting us in yet, but they were letting some people in. So I wanted to be around for that. And one of the people on the fire team, he was from a fire crew in Sacramento. And just from seeing me coming to these briefings, we got to recognize and know each other. And he wanted to help out, and he knew we had abandoned a couple of cars, and so he wanted to help us get those. And I guess that was on the Saturday night, and so I wanted to stay and be there if that happened, and he needed me to meet him somewhere. And also Dee and Sandra, they were having to do things, there's no time to be in shock. You have to get onto FEMA, get onto this, get on your insurance company. And but they really took it a step at a time, and they had support. And Kristen, who was one of our neighbors, she's been helping them tremendously. She's really good with the legal stuff like that. And just the support of everybody. Dennis inviting us to come to his house if we needed to get on a computer and print something out. And everybody, Beth and I went to the post office, and we had heard at a briefing that the post office would have the Redwood Valley mail. And so we went into the Ukiah post office, and they had one at the door where you can sometimes drop packages off. They had that open, and it said Redwood Valley only. And there was a drop-off for Redwood Valley residents only. And so you go and you ring the bell. And I said to Beth, I wonder if our people are going to be here, our crew. And they were. So it was just, and for them, just to see that people were okay every time they saw somebody for the first time was it's all very heartwarming. The care, the caring, the kindness, the thoughtfulness, the people working together. And these are people that don't necessarily have a meditation practice, but they're human beings, and they have that empathetic sense, and that sense of that commonality of spirit and that human experience. So then they did get our cars out. I got a text, and it was a picture, of my friend Chris and a woman, Amber. She was from the fire crew in Santa Barbara, in their yellow jackets, and they're standing in front of two Priuses at the school, holding keys. And then I knew they got the cars out. So we went and picked those, met him at the briefing, and he gave us the keys, and they told us stories. And I told him, don't go in if it's going to be dangerous. And he said, I won't go in if it's dangerous. But, we like a little covert operation once in a while. So for them, the fire was, by the time I got to the Abhayagiri property, that fire was just a fire. It wasn't that firestorm with that tremendous wind. And so people were working hard and fighting hard, but that sense of urgency was not quite the same. I mean, really, there was not much people could do with that firestorm. And then the day after the Katina, they did open up Tom Kai Road to residents only. And so we decided to take a van. Lumpur went, myself, and a couple other monks, and Beth. And we all went in, and the National Guard was there, and you had to sign a release, and then they gave you your little mask. And we went in. We just needed to kind of see what was up. Did we have electricity? Did we have water? What was the condition of the monastery? We did know they had been using our parking lot as a staging area, so that was a good thing. And it came over our ridge, and it came over on three sides. I don't know if anybody saw a map, but it actually started coming over from three different sides, and it came down quite far on one side, but it hit the loop trail, and the loop trail that was really useful to the fire crews, and it kind of goes around at an elevation. It's kind of runs around the bowl, so it goes around the bowl. The fire apparently, and some of them said it was very strange. They'd never seen it before. It was coming down, and in a couple places it did actually go across the loop trail, but then it started going back up again. So the wind, who knows? The benevolent forces, I can't lay claim to knowing what it was, but I know that the people who were there, and one of the fire crews and one of the earth workers who does bulldozer, he came in with their bulldozer, and they do work for us. His comment was, there was something protecting the monastery. So who knows? But anyway, the monastery buildings, we went into the buildings, and the meditation hall, it could have been any day. In fact, one of the laymen had been meditating, and he still had his zabuton and his zafu and his chanting books. They were still there where he left them a week ago. It was untouched, no smoke damage. We were just tremendously blessed, as were all our neighbors in that general area. For everybody that we could see, the burns had come down and around some of the buildings, but those firefighters, they really work hard to protect the buildings if they can. So we didn't have water. When we left the Samanera there, so he could start working on the water, trying to figure out where the pipe was broken, probably from a bulldozer line, and I'm pretty sure that's what he found out. We did have electricity. PG&E got in there really quickly and got they did 150, 200 electrical poles that they had to put back up. And so we decided it was okay, the power was on, that it was okay to come in the next day with everybody. So Lumpur was great. One of the first things we did when the van got there was we went into the Dhamma hall and bowed and just paid our respects and expressed our gratitude. And then when we brought everybody in, we had planned to, Dee was unable to come in with us, but we came in caravan and we went to Sandra's house first. And the devastation was, it was shocking. I still am a little shocked when I go by and see things. It's just, and ask myself, well, at some point you're going to be inured to this, but it's not happening very fast. So we went to Sandra's house, and there's pictures on the website if you haven't seen them. And her house was there was a chimney, there were the stakes for her garden fence, and pretty much just you could see where the outline of the house, where the garage, and then it was just a lot of ash and whatever. And we were walking around with her, and somebody said, "Sandra, look at that." And there was a little tree in her yard not far from the house. She had a ring of stones around it. The tree had some charring, but not a lot. And there were some flagstones like that. And next to it, but laying on the ground, was this resin Buddha that was about like a garden Buddha. It wasn't stone. It was about that big. And emotion just came up. That's the first time a lot of emotion came up. And she was so happy. Because her husband had died in 2012. And she said, "This is the Buddha Alan gave me. He bought it at a supermarket." And the Buddha was untouched. It's really interesting. And that tree was untouched. It's just, fire is a very bizarre thing. And she was very happy to have that. And then they did some chanting at the property, at her house, and just wanting to support her as well. And then we went back to the monastery. We chanted in the big Dhamma hall. We went back up to the upper Dhamma hall and did some chanting. And then we got busy. And crews got the big bins and then started emptying the walk-in refrigerator and the freezer. But astoundingly, things were in not that bad a shape after a week with no electricity. It was pretty amazing. So we did a cleanup. Beth and I went into town with some of those food cards and got groceries, and because we weren't going to open up to guests for a while until we were sure that there was a lot of crews on the road, PG&E, everybody. But just just supporting each other in that. A lot of joy. We were just supporting Sandra, and the next day Dee was with us, so a group of us went over to her house and walked around her house, and she found her Dhammachakka Buddha. I think you have one. You have one downstairs somewhere. It's the one with the teaching, and we have it at the monastery up at the ordination platform. And they were able to find that. There's a picture of that on the website. And, Buddha images are intended really to remind us as reminders to get out of ourselves and as a reminder to be in the moment. And this one now will always be a reminder of uncertainty and impermanence. It's got, its arms were gone, but there's strangely this very beautiful aspect to it. And then she also had this ceramic. It was called a Circle of Friends, and it was these ceramic things with their arms around each other, and that was laying there. So Dee was pretty excited, and her son had come up to help kind of sift through things and see if he could find anything that was important. And he found her, I think it was, Dee and Sandra are both in their 70s, so this is a big thing for them to lose it all. But he found her grandmother's diamond wedding ring, which as a diamond ring, there's monetary value, but really it was the connection to past. It was the value of that in this little thing. And he was so happy he found it. He came to the monastery, put it on his little finger. He hadn't found it yet when we were there. And he came for tea, and I saw him and he showed me. So he went up to her and he goes, "Mom." So it's these little things, and just her family, her son in Arizona. He couldn't come and see her, but what he was doing was sending her packages. These care packages kept coming for her daily, and it goes on. And really, the support there's been 2 meetings in Redwood Valley itself, and I've gone to one of them, and I will go to more, just to keep tabs, keep up with what's happening in this recovery, but also just wanting to be there. We because people are still numb. The reality of the magnitude of it is astounding, and you're having to respond to paperwork and things like that, and find that within yourself to be present for that at the same time as you're trying to figure out. There's a lot of steps in the process, and it's going to take time. And it's a grieving process too. So often in grief, the pain, you don't really see the confusion. There's a numbness. So, we just want to be there for whoever we can to help support them when everybody's life goes back to their routine. And they're going to need more support because they're still going through it, and it's still coming up. Stuff will still be coming up. So Sandra and Dee have been living with us, and that's been really wonderful. But now they're going to move across the street into a house that one of our supporters has. He has a little cabin above it, and they're going to move in together and still support each other, but also be in this space where they can actually look out the window and see the monastery. And Sandra was all excited because it's about an 8-minute walk. And she's, oh, I can walk over. So we don't know what the door that's opening will be for all these people. We have one of our carpenters lost his house. He's one of the first people we saw as we were driving back in the first day when we did our reconnaissance. Him and his wife were there. And he was all excited, actually, that we showed up. And she was saying she had been the holder of the family Bible that was like 5 generations, and that was gone. And she was kind of coming to terms with some of the things that you couldn't put a price on. And but she said, he's what keeps me going. And he was all, yeah, I want to show you something. And so we went and looked, and behind their house there were some steps going down towards the creek. And he had built some rock walls, and there was a Buddha down there. The Buddhists showed up a lot. And he was very excited that Buddha image survived the fire. And then they were very happy that we stopped. And then we have the guy who does our concrete lost his place. And we have another woman who comes to the monastery. And we'd heard a story of somebody that they couldn't drive down towards, I don't know if it was on Tomkai or West Road. I think it was on Tomkai. They couldn't drive down because the fire was already coming up. So they had to go on foot over the other side towards Willits. And so it turns out she was with some neighbors, and they were walking together, and there were children. And you know, this was 1:32, 2:30 in the morning, one of the colder mornings we'd had yet. And they got to the neighbor's house, and they'd already left, but they had an ATV there with the keys in it. So it's just, so they got out, and really considering the magnitude of things, the loss of life was very minimal. And so it's ongoing in our practice. That's where we're going to really be drawing on our practice to keep holding these people in our hearts, keep remembering that we can be there as just quiet support, just to listen. We can be there just as neighbors. We can be a refuge. People aren't allowed to walk the loop trail right now because of the damage, but people can just come and sit. It's a place for people, and people do that. Our contractor who does the concrete work, he came with his wife and his son and spent about 2 hours sitting up by a Buddha that's right in our main area, but outside, just being there. So those are the things we have to offer as our presence, and but just that gratitude that goes both ways. People's generosity, recognizing the generosity, and then the gratitude we experience through recognizing that. For Sandra and Dee, it's a lot about receiving. At the monastery, we do that all the time, so we become more accustomed to it, and we learn how to do that. But it's not easy if you're not used to doing that. And so this is a big teaching for them, and how to receive. And it's a very heart-opening experience. And very grateful to have a practice to just keep bringing back. And there are days where just out of nowhere the tears will come. Just when I drive through and I see the devastation and but they pass too, and then we just support each other. A lot of people, a lot of houses, and then that was only one area. In the wake of hurricanes, and in Puerto Rico, they're not having. I mean, we've been blessed and we've been taken care of, and it's astounding. In Puerto Rico, they're still back at the first hurricane. So, yeah, it's just interesting reflections. One reflection that I had, and then I'll wind it down from there. Just around karma. And just that this is, this fire was the result of something, and it's neither good nor bad. You can't place that value on it really, because we don't really know. We don't really know all the underlying conditions that led to it. We don't really know. We don't really know what the fruits of this are going to be. And I've already seen yeah, there's going to be struggle. There's going to be some hardship. There has been some hardship. Lives were lost. But the opportunity that people rose to come together and support each other and build a community where maybe we didn't have as much contact with our neighbors. There's much more sense of community. Even the neighbors that we had troubles with our spring, and we had to go to court with that. She called us and left a message on our phone, but we had no power. We didn't get the message, and it was at 1:30 in the morning. We got back and found out she called us to tell us. So it's just, yeah, it's good to see that in everybody, and sometimes it's not so easy, but it's one of the blessings. And I'm sure there's going to be, the blessings are going to keep unfolding, and as we just normalize it all as much as possible.